Thanks for tuning into the Upstream Life podcast. Join us as we dive into scripture and tell real life stories that we hope will educate, equip, inspire, and challenge you to live a life against the flow.
In this episode of the podcast, Sami and Joe sit down to give a life update, talk about what's been going on, how the Lord's been speaking to them, and where he's leading them next. This is an intermission 2-part series, so expect the second part next Monday. We hope you are encouraged and inspired to live a life against the flow.
Well, okay, so we'll just tell people we had a plan, okay?
Yeah.
And it seems like every time we have a plan, our plan is like in some way, shape, or form hijacked. So we had like you, me, Ben, we sat down, prayed it up. We're like, okay, we're going to lay out our schedule.
Responsible.
We were going to lay out our schedule for the year.
Yes.
For a podcast.
Yeah.
And we did get through an entire series.
Yeah.
So we're kind of like doing an intermission.
Yeah.
And then I don't even remember what we have planned for the real one.
I have it in my notes. United Divided.
Oh. We'll have to see because we did prayerfully plan that. But life has changed quite a bit since then.
Yeah. I mean, God says...
what does he say, babe?
Well, as far as making plans for tomorrow and stuff like that, you know, there's...
Yeah, it's not bad to have a plan.
There's a lot of cultural responsibility in being very goal-oriented and setting things. But if you're going to be a podcast and a lifestyle that calls itself Upstream, then you kind of just have to plan that every day could be a little different.
Well, yeah, because so we typically film like several weeks ahead just because we have learned that life changes for us sometimes.
Yeah. And in this situation, it worked out. Yeah,
it worked out because we haven't had a week to play, like to actually film or record for weeks. So thank God that we had the forethought to do that. I'm so tired, babe. But since the last time we filmed, which was probably a month ago, because you were in
4
Haiti.
weeks at least,
We haven't even filmed since before you went to Haiti. Or since you went to Haiti, which was the beginning of April.
Yeah, I think
and
4
it's
weeks.
now the 22nd of May. So we really stockpiled, thank God, because, you know, things have changed.
Yeah.
So do we want to like list off any of the things that have changed since we last filmed?
I mean,
other than like
we could start the list, but I think it would be overwhelming.
we probably start crying.
Yeah.
I mean, I have cried a lot the last couple days when I think
the reality
just
is
the
this.
weight of everything going on.
I think the reality is this, you know, there's history, right? So there's just yours and I's life that led up to this Upstream Life thing. And much like one of our daughters wrote recently, you know, there's a lot of stuff we've done in the past that constituted an Upstream Life slogan. Yeah. But then in the midst of teaching out of that, you're like, well, where are we practicing our Upstream Life every day? Now, granted, you know, we're doing mission. I mean, we live quite different than just, you know, people down the street, but people down the street
maybe
live quite different
ways.
too. Like
maybe in some ways.
I don't want to say super unique, but I think we both had this weird God-led conviction of what are we doing right now that constitutes an Upstream Life. And just submitting and surrendering to that, the list begins with selling our home.
Which we've honestly talked about pretty much since we got it.
Yeah, we knew and
like
received,
we love it. It's been a great place for us. Like, how can you ever be mad about this house? Like, it's beautiful. We have plenty of space. It's been a great place for us to like rest and heal since coming home from Haiti. And we got to have our daughter and granddaughter be here while our son-in-law is away. We're military. Like, it's been so good. Like, we've had a lot of great memories here. You know, we had a kid start high school here. And we had a kid graduate high school here.
Ben and Cal had their wedding
Ben and Cal's got married.
Here.
You know, their reception was here. Like, it's been a really, their reception. It's been such a great place for us. But since the beginning, we've kind of wondered, what is it in us that feels called to something different?
Yeah, my version may be a little different than yours. Yeah. But for me, it feels...
That's not uncommon.
Well, no, but I just feel... I'm not talking about like the hard, tangible parts, but like the loose end parts.
Yeah.
For me, it really boils down to like expectations. Because like I said, there's history to this. Years and years and years ago, it began with a call to sell everything we own and go to Haiti. You do that, and it's hard not to have an expectation. You know, expectations slam you in the face. And then you find yourself having to move back to the States, you know, because of coups and just a lot of
And
stuff
just
going
life.
on.
Mm-hmm.
And when we came back to America,
The second time or the first time?
the time that led us to Texas,
Yeah, the second time.
I'm just going to be honest. I wanted nothing but comfort. I mean,
Yeah,
I would have almost,
it,
I would have
quite
almost
honestly.
preferred a hotel room where a lady comes in every morning and cleans up
Or a
after
man.
me, or a man comes in every day and cleans up after me. Like I needed that kind of rest
Ease,
and reconnect with God, reconnect with our purpose, our marriage, our parenting, like reconnect with all that. And then once God is like first and foremost in your life again, you get brought right back to your original plans and purposes. And that's how are you living upstream?
Okay, so you just said something in your sentence that you said reconnect with God again. And I think that is really important for people to understand that, like, just because you live your life with full-time ministry or as a pastor or as a pastor's family or whatever, like, there are seasons, right? There are seasons where things are really difficult. There's seasons of struggle. There's seasons of, distance. And one of the things, so this morning, obviously, that there was a phenomenal sermon at church, right?
Yeah.
And he was basically, we'll just give like a 2-second nutshell version. He was basically talking about the difference between being religious and righteous and kind of how you can recognize that. And the one, like, I know our family is going to talk about this later, but the one that really like busted me up, like big time, was him saying, the overarching heading was, we are religious but not righteous when. And then there was these different things and we were kind of trying to figure out what we identified with the most. And for me it was
there 6 of them, wasn't there?
Yep. And for me it was promote cause without Christ.
Ooh.
Oh, it got me so hard. Because
Explain that to me a little bit, because I have my own version of what that would mean to me. But
yeah, well, I mean, and I feel like my guess would be that most people that know us well know that we are promoting a cause, right? Like
always.
We are people, I mean, I'll just talk to specifically myself. Like obviously we're kind of a package deal around here, but personally, like I'm somebody that any type of injustice gets me really going. And obviously we've given, 11 and a half some years to the cause of, these kids that we're fighting for and the people that we're fighting for in Haiti. And I think that there's been many times in my life, especially the last 2 years, where I am more cause driven than I am Christ driven, if I'm being really honest with myself and everybody else. And I think that sometimes in the church, like we avoid those truths because you're supposed to say a certain thing. You're supposed to look a certain way. You're supposed to act a certain way. And so today when you're like, oh, like, wow, like, am I religious? Because the truth of the matter is, like, you live with me, my family lives with me. You guys know, like, the last couple of years has been really hard for me.
Yeah.
And I have struggled to, like, just care more about my relationship with Christ than a cause.
Sure.
So yeah, that just, it got me. And I think even with everything we have going on right now, just feeling this like leading to live a like more simple life.
Yeah.
I even have to challenge myself to be like, am I truly doing that because of Christ?
Yeah.
Or like, is it another cause? Is it something that like looks good and sounds good on paper? Even if that paper is the Bible.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah, that's, wow, really? Really?
Yeah.
Really, really got me. And I think it just makes you really think like, I don't want to be religious. And I think what was beautiful about his message was that he was also pointing out the areas in which that he can recognize it in himself. And I think he even mentioned like, oh, the people that are like this. And you can easily think about people in your life that you may feel are religious or legalistic or whatever. And it's like, I think that it can, like, you can be doing really good things.
Yeah.
Even things like that God's asked you to do in scripture. And it can still be religious.
Yeah, if it doesn't point back to Christ,
Well, if your own heart isn't there, if your own, and I think that the reality is we all have these seasons, right?
Geez, yeah.
but they're just not talked about.
Right.
They're really not.
Yeah.
And I think that the church, especially for people like you and me who are in ministry, who are known to be in ministry, who are probably elevated when you don't want to be in any way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's easy for people to think, oh, like the Rogalskis, they have it together. Like Sammy must have it together. Look, she's like, except for today, I don't, because my hair is a mess. I forgot my earrings. I have makeup everywhere. I'm yawning. I'm stressed out. I'm literally just like trying to hang on and not freak out.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that we allow that space for people to like really go through stuff and really be gracious towards them. And even just like being gracious towards yourself,
Right, exactly.
Because I think about, well, if you're looking at God, like the sermon, was it last week or the week before, you're looking at God from like the father standpoint, not the, dictator standpoint. Like if this was my kids and my kids were disconnected from me and not wanting to spend time with me, or like not really feeling it when they're spending time with me, like my heart towards them would not change any.
Yeah.
It would break my heart,
but
it's not like I would be like remove myself from them. Right. But yet we kind of tell ourselves that sometimes about God, or we believe that sometimes about God. And so I don't know. I could probably ramble for a long time about this. But
no, you're coming from a good place, though.
Going into this season of just really feeling this conviction to just live differently, and looking at our own lives, and even listening to the words of our own kids that are like, how are we? How are we actually living an upstream life? Like, how are we? Because cool, great. Anybody can, well, maybe not anybody would, but anybody could run an organization like ours. Anybody could, do some of the things that we've done. But like at the end of the day, does it like really matter? Yeah. Are we religious or are we righteous? Like that's really got me a little bit.
Maybe we'll make that the title.
Kevin Flowers.
Are you religious or are you righteous?
Here's how you know. Let me smack you in the face.
I love that.
All morning.
I love
in such a gentle and funny way he does it.
He is. He's
like,
really great.
It's like week after week, I'm like, I come home and I'm like, I just feel beat up, but in the best way possible. Not condemned, but just like challenged.
Like you did it with others, not just all by yourself.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that was a long time of talking.
No, that was great though, and that's kind of the point. We grabbed each other this morning. We knew that we were, nobody that's watching this knows that.
Well, I did just say we're filming on a Sunday.
I know nobody that's watching this knows that you're running out of back filming, so this will just kind of show up like it was planned, but really just so people that are jumping on or watching this realize like we're in a super chaotic season of life. We're going to share some of that in this kind of 2-part series. We're going to call this like whatever we title it.
What the heck are we doing?
/ 2-part intermission. But to jump off what you were saying, if I'm going to be honest, this is kind of a sidestep from what you're talking about because you're just being vulnerable and sharing a place in your heart. And today's message, in light of everything that we're going through, filtered through how are you living your upstream life type question. We took a big swing at what I thought was our upstream life when we went to go live abroad. There's all kinds of different reasons and motivations, calls of God to go do things like that. But even certain parts of me, when you throw yourself into a place like Haiti, you're forced to go upstream. I mean, you know what I mean? There's not enough people around you to go with the flow. You're living off grid. You have solar panels. You have a generator. You have lack of supplies. You just have to live.
You have everything breaking.
Yeah, you have to live a very different life. That for me, because all the conveniences of America were stripped away, it forced me as a man to need God more. Because I didn't have the answers. I didn't know all the hardware stores. I didn't know I didn't have the phone directory to call when I needed an ambulance or a hospital. Like you didn't have anything, and God was your go-to first.
Well, the first time we were there wasn't even really like an ambulance, but whatever. That's
sure.
fine.
No,
neither here nor there.
I'm just trying to,
I know what you
I'm
mean.
just trying to say, like, for me spiritually, I always kind of described it to friends that have a lot of spiritual background that it's like anything else that you give your time to. Like if you lift weights, the goal is always to lift a little bit more, a little bit harder, push yourself, stretch yourself. A runner, go a little further distance. Same thing kind of happened with me spiritually. You know, it's like he kind of wanted to kind of always push the envelope of, and like I said, you all of a sudden throw yourself in one of the scariest environments. Danger is always around you. Spiritually, it was like trying to do your maximum lift every day.
Yeah. And when you're not in that, you don't know really what to do.
You needed God. So when we came home the first time in 2018, I just felt so lost.
Totally.
Because I was like, I've been PRing every day, and now I just got to like curl these little plastic 5-pound dumbbells. And that's not real. Like, that's not when I'm saying that's not real. But
it can definitely feel.
It felt like that. Because for me, once you're living that type of a lifestyle, it's really hard to just go back to, all right, my 9 to 5, because the daily grind of America is just so expensive to kind of live in that flow, right? Like, we're talking about going against the flow, but when you're living in that flow, it's like it's bills upon bills, and most of your day is trying to figure out how to make money and how to pay those bills. And like I said, this is all personal. This is not.
Yeah, and like right now, of course, everything is more expensive,
right.
So it's like. It's just crazy.
Yeah, so that,
I mean, like
you speed
things are
up,
just so crazy. I think about like young people. Like I was just reading this post in this like RV group that I'm in, and there's like 40-some thousand people in the group. One of my friends got me into it, and it's like 40,000 some people in the group, and it's like people that are living in an RV with kids. Mm-hmm. That's what the group is specifically. Okay. So this guy, it's an older gentleman, comes in the group and he makes this post about how he ended up in an RV after a divorce and lived in one for like 13 years. And then, blah, 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 like this whole long story about how he had everything, but then he like lost it. And then he ended up in an RV. And he basically, was condemning everybody for living in one and telling everybody like, it's really stupid that you're living in an RV with your kids. Like you're not giving them what they need. Like you should be buying a house and worrying about your retirement and like all of these things. And in literally like 8 minutes, there was 400 comments of people that were like, whoa, dude, like what the heck? Well, then he made another post and he said, I'm really sorry. Like I didn't mean to offend anybody. Stop attacking me. And so I just commented to the stop attacking me. Well, I commented to the first one. I just said, I think you might be in the wrong group. This one's like specifically for people that are doing this with their kids. But then on the second one, I just commented, I said, it's not too late for you to delete it. And he didn't know how. So I like told him how to delete it. But then it's like, you think about it and it's like, that guy's experience, like that is true for him. Well, but other people's experience, that's also what's true for them right now. And
that's the beautiful part of perspective.
Right.
If you lose everything and you're forced into an RV, it can feel while you're living in an RV like the world's against you. And
right, but many people are choosing
that's
to go that direction, right? Yeah. And so there's
because they're like, I've already done all that 401k stuff and the nice house stuff, and it's still a bottomless pit, and my kids and I are just far apart in our big house.
Yes. So there's some of those, but then there's also people that are young, like our kids, that right now our country is not set up for them to be able to buy a home.
Yeah, it's true. It'd
Rent
be really
is
hard
so
to buy a house
insane.
Right now. Yeah.
Food is insane. Cars are insane. Everything is so expensive that it's like you and me
overnight
have been together, 20-some years. At the beginning of that, we would have been able to, not buy a house like we could maybe buy now, but like we could have at least gotten something little. Yeah. You can't even do that now. It's $300,000 for a pile of doo-doo, in the ghetto. Truly, it is. So it's like, it's just, as life continues to progress, you kind of are forced to kind of look at things like, I'm either going to just try and keep up and just go with it, or you're going to be like, I can't do this. Like, what is the option,
See, going with it just isn't worth it to me anymore. And that kind of becomes, I think, just a life lived out a lot of one thing. No matter how I say this, it just sounds prideful. So I caution, but it's like, but I just mean experientially. The way that I came into this world, the things that I had to experience up until the age of adulthood, and then even the choices that you and I made to choose experience over everything else. Like, we'll call it the mundane. I remember different slogans that have hung in our house, whatever, reckless abandon and, anything but the mundane. We both valued this time on earth enough to say, let's not waste the time.
Yeah.
No, that doesn't mean that you don't trip and fall and make some horrific
Yeah, mistakes.
But what do you do when you shake yourself up from that and you have to get back on the horse?
Yeah.
You know, so for me, it's just, we're brought to this place where, like you started, how thankful that we were able to return back to a place and be able to buy a place like this to do the healing that we needed to do. But like I said, in the midst of that void, you know, and we can only always describe them as those God voids, like something just feels off. And for both of us in the quiet place of our hearts, it's like, this isn't us. Like, you know, it's not that it's wrong, but it's just not us to be buried in debt. You know, when I say debt, I mean like a big house in the suburbs with all these different things, when what we really care about is family, togetherness, and the gospel going, like loving, like we both are practitioners. Like when I think about Sami Rogalski and Joe Rogalski and why God would bring the two of us together, it's because we've always been practitioners. We want to be practicers of what we preach, is what I mean. So, you know, here we are sitting, preaching, teaching other listeners out there how to live these upstream lives, how to live lives that have meaningful value, not to get at the end, right? Because it really all stems back to meeting with those old men and women doing shut-ins when I was 20 years old, saying, what do you tell a young man who's about to get married and have babies? You know, none of them ever said, you know, get a bigger house, you know, work more hours. You know, sometimes they had their spouses in their rooms. You know, they said, you know, these were Christian men and women, you know, serve the Lord, you know, serve the church, serve God's message, love your family, all these different things. So anyways, here we are. Here we are a couple of years into the healing process of what we came home, you know, we'll call from war. Yeah. We came home from war and we're just pressed in at the feet of Christ saying, okay, tell us a little bit more about this little angst in us that seems to not go away.
Well, I mean, in just kind of piggybacking off what you're talking about, I think one thing that has been such a beautiful blessing to us is that because of the way that we've, you know, lived our lives since having kids, some of the things that they have learned over the years, they preach back at us. Yeah. And I think that that's been something that's, you know, it's sometimes like, whoa, but it's also so beautiful. And I think, you know, as we've been kind of just pressing in and trying to figure out what is it that we're supposed to be doing, right? Like, obviously we know based on scripture, like what we're supposed to be doing, right? We're supposed to love our neighbor. We're supposed to love God. We're supposed to care for the poor. We're supposed, you know, like those things are obvious. Yeah. We're doing some of those things, but then we're also still left with, okay, but our daily life, our personal life, our family life, our living life, how is it that we can live our life so that, in just where we live and how we live, like how that can also be used for kingdom purposes and for, you know, for the good of others too.
Yeah, because it feels like that detachment sometimes. And for me personally, it's hard for me to admit this because the reality is just true. We self-inflict, you know, some of that debt burden. You know what I mean? Like, the reality is you can live in America cheaper than we are. It's just to do that, like you kind of have to humble yourself and ask yourself, like, okay, what am I willing to live without?
Yeah. What do I actually need?
Am I willing to live at 1,200 square feet rather than 3,000 square feet? Am I willing to like have a safe, dry home that I can beat the elements in, or does it have to have granite and stainless steel appliance? You know what I mean? Like, I know that sounds silly, but
it is.
At the end of the day, it really starts boiling down to that. But then you start weighing what it costs. Like, once you get past the, like, for some of us, like for me personally, it costs a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, because, you know, to earn more money is very possible. There's nothing difficult in America about earning more money.
If you have the drive, if you have, you know.
Yeah, I know, but what you can't get back is time.
Right.
Like, exactly. I no matter what I do. I just mean,
like, not everybody is going to be able to make.
Yeah, no, that sounds like.
I know what you mean.
I'm just saying.
There's opportunities.
If you want to trade time for money, you can go make more money. I'm saying, even like, if I wanted to, I probably have 8 available hours in my day. If I were to really work hard, I could probably go make another $14 an hour, even at McDonald's.
If you didn't want to see us ever. Yeah.
No, that's what I mean though. Right. It's like, I'm not even talking about making another $1 million or making $100,000. Right. I'm just saying, if I wanted to, I could go make $14 more an hour somewhere if I wanted to.
But the truth of the matter is,
But I can't make up more time.
It would just get spent.
Right. So for the Christian who is really motivated by Christ and his example and the disciples' example and those after, you realize for them to do the things that we sit in awe of, they had to have a different mindset. And their mindset had to be first and foremost focused on the things of God and somehow just trust that the other parts would be taken care of. That's always
hard
been
to do in our culture.
It's
like it
always
really is.
been the one thing that I have fought since the day I gave my life to the Lord. If I'm going to be completely honest with you, I think it's been a lot of my duplicity is trying to how to live and love this God that I'm just ferocious about while maintaining a lifestyle in America that doesn't leave my kids feeling less than or
leave you too uncomfortable.
When you truly come from a place of how important time is, how short this life is, and even if you do a pros and cons on paper, what matters most to you? Mine just doesn't have hours, I should say. It just doesn't show up compared to the time that we give. You know, like I said, all the anxieties and worries about the other stuff.
I think what's kind of tricky or has been tricky for us is I think once you've experienced other parts of the world and you've seen how other people live and you've lived differently, I think it's just very difficult to come back and live the way that when I say everyone else here, obviously that's not true, right? Like there's whatever. There's people across the spectrum of like poverty and wealthy here. Yeah. But I'm saying even in the poverty here, there's still opportunity and access that isn't available in other places. So what I mean is, you know, when you've lived without hot water, when you've lived without air conditioning, when you've lived without power, when you've done some of these things, you realize like, yes, is it nice to have power? Of course. Yeah. Do you want it? Yes. Do you want to provide it for kids? Absolutely. Yeah. Is it nice to have AC? Yes, of course. Water is important. Yeah. We don't ever want to keep that from our family. But when you realize like there's a large majority of people in the world that are living very differently than you are, and you've seen it time and time again, I think it just kind of leaves you a little dizzy.
It does. Ben and I just got to experience a prayer. We had a meeting of our pastors in Haiti, and it ended in worship and prayer. And I keep just going back to that place because this last week I wrote in one of my devos, you know, how much does culture shape your Christianity? And that's a hard topic to get in, and a lot of people have different starting points. But the whole fact of the matter is those guys, as far as worth to God, are worth just as much to God as I am or anybody else is. Yet the culture around them doesn't give them the opportunity to have the burdens that we have. Like they don't know what it's like to have a $2,000 a month house payment or a $700 a month vehicle payment or a $2,000 a month food bill or whatever. So it's like they don't have those constraints, yet they have brokenness and the need to spread the gospel and all that type of stuff all around them. So the freedom of their faith, the testimonies we get to hear of them going into the market and spreading the gospel, they just look different than they do here. And that's just a cultural thing. So I think when you start to experience the world at large, like I said, you start to realize we've done this to ourselves in part. Like we've heaped these burdens on ourselves mostly because of going with the flow. Like it's what we all do. Mm-hmm. We all do this together. I mean, look at our suburb or the development we live in right now is 1,000 homes, look exactly the same with about the same cars in them, with about the same month. You know, we're very, very similar. So how do you stand out in that? How do you separate yourself? And I think we just see that.
And when you say separate yourself, obviously anybody that lives on our street or in our development, I wouldn't anyone to think like, I don't know,
I just mean to be set apart, I just mean as far as a biblical sense, like if we all look the same, if we all blend in, yet and I mean that even in our problems, that means we also all share probably the same burdens and the same problems. How does one point to a different way if they're not doing a different thing?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I think right now, what feels hard in this season is we are sharing a lot about the Bible. We're sharing a lot about what Christian living looks like, but we both feel like we're kind of just doing it the same as everybody else.